the federal government's response actually has been to freeze financial assistance grants. So not even raise them with CPI, they're on a freeze of financial assistance grants. So councils are already feeling the crunch, and they're feeling the crunch more. But you know what's most remarkable about local government? You imagine if you were trying to balance the books after 35 years of that. You've been doing that for 35 years, you've been trying to maintain the services, you've been doing everything you possibly can. If the kind of talent that ran the state or the federal government was in charge of local government's finances over those 35 years, we would be seeing deficits from one end of the country to the other. But IPART has done an assessment of local councils. And IPART doesn't have really the skills to assess local governments in terms of their democracy. You know, there are a bunch of bean counters and accountants in IPART. They set the prices of water and electricity and others. I've said before that getting IPART to judge local government is like getting an accountant to judge a horse. And so they haven't got the skills to really judge local democracy as a body politic, but they do have the skills. And I give them this credit. They've got the skills to judge the finances of local government. And they've gone like a dose of salts through all the council finances. And so in Metro Sydney, you know, which is where they really want to crunch the councils, in Metro Sydney, I'd ask you, what proportion of councils do you think were found financially fit by IPART, the bean counters in Metro Sydney? If you swallowed the Kool-Aid from the government, you'd probably say, well, they're all going to be 10%, 5%. 93% of councils in Metro Sydney were found financially fit by IPART. And the smallest councils were actually found financially extraordinarily robust. The worst performing council in Sydney is in fact the biggest council in Sydney, the one with 312,000 residents in it, Blacktown Council. It's in an ongoing financial mess. It doesn't have a way out of its financial mess, and IPART noted that they've got their finances are a basket case. So the argument that the bigger you get, the more financially robust you are, is just blown out of the water even by IPART's own assessment. And across the rest of the state, IPART found about 70% of councils across the state were financially fit. So what did they say? Well, they say they should all be blown up and all merged. Why did they do that? They did that because they were given a rigged set of assessments. IPART is kind of independent of government, but they were given a set of terms of reference from the government, from the Premier, which basically tied their hands together. And what the terms of reference said is that effectively, unless councils can show sufficient scale and capacity, then it doesn't matter what their finances are. It doesn't matter how much their community supports them. It doesn't matter how good their services are. It doesn't matter how efficient they are. Nothing else matters. Unless they can show sufficient scale and capacity, they are failed and they're found not fit. So, what is scale and capacity, you ask? Well, I asked the same question. We've had an upper house inquiry. We asked the minister what scale and capacity was. So I won't repeat what the minister says, but you know, a bunch of chattering monkeys typing could actually have given the answer to what the minister gave. I asked the head of local government what they were. One person in local government said scale and capacity were the same thing. Another person said scale meant something, capacity meant something else, and when you add them together they meant something else. We asked IPART what scale and capacity said and how they did their assessments, and they said they won't tell us. So IPART have done a detailed assessment of every council's scale and capacity, detailed little matrix. They've done a comprehensive analysis, they say. And their report does not disclose any of their workings. Their report does not tell you how it was they went about assessing councils from Bega to Ballina on their scale and capacity. But we do know that they used ideas such as the council's innovation and creativity, and the council's credibility as an advocate, and other
leadership capacity.
Yeah, leadership capacity, a variety of completely discretionary, sort of gut instinct kind of analysis. And of course IPART don't want to show us how they did their workings because they will be embarrassing. They will be embarrassing because they failed the City of Sydney on scale and capacity. Yet they also said in their report that the City of Sydney is probably the single most robust part of government in the entire country. It's got enormous reserves and has a very strong financial record. That it has a very well-established record of delivering large-scale urban renewals and including affordable housing and partners extremely effectively with the state government. They also said the City of Sydney Council has enormously strong support from its local residents. So it's financially robust, it partners well with state government, has a long track record of delivering all of the urban renewal projects that you could ever want it to do, including some of the biggest urban renewal projects in Australia, but it was failed on scale and capacity because the government decided to actually even rig it further for the City of Sydney. And they said for the City of Sydney, even if you meet the scale and capacity criteria that all other metro councils have, we're going to give you an additional ability to fail, because you're going to have to meet a global city. And the global city has to have, I think, 500,000 residents in it, and has to have a certain enormous size. And of course, you know, as much as the City of Sydney tried to breed up in the last 6 months, they still only have less than 200,000 residents in it, and they were always going to be failed in what was a crooked and rotten assessment. So IPART fails council after council after council as being not fit. The Premier goes out and puts a media release and says 73% of councils are not fit, as found by our independent mates here at IPART, and we're going to go and we're going to force you and merge you, and it's going to happen. So, remarkably, and I've got to say it's a remarkable factor, only 9 councils across the entire state have voluntarily agreed to merge. Because they've all said this process is crooked, our residents don't want it, and as I'm sure Bly will tell you, there's no evidence that merging and making councils bigger will fix anything at all. Anything at all. In fact, the very best evidence that we've had as a parliamentary committee, when I was sitting on the parliamentary committee, and that I've received in my role as an MP, has been that as you make councils bigger, and Hannah alluded to this earlier, as you make councils bigger, you actually don't get that many economies of scale. You get some economies of scale. So if we just had one big local government area across all of New South Wales, well then you would obviously save money on the number of councillors. You might go down to 15 councillors and you'd save some money on local councillors. You'd also save some money on the payroll and some of the OHS and some of the sort of governance things that feature amongst councils. You might also get some efficiencies by having tenders done at a cheaper rate because you've got bulk goods and you can bulk buy. But most of the services that are provided by a local government, running the local library, fixing up the local footpaths, doing the local Meals on Wheels, assessing the local planning issues, most of those are very people-to-people service kind of functions. And as a general rule, as you make organisations bigger, instead of getting economies of scale and making that more efficient, you have to have layers of management and protocols and accountabilities, and then more layers of management and more protocols and more accountabilities, and you in fact get significant diseconomies of scale.